Hello, and welcome to our next video. Today, I wanted to address another key topic when it comes to your money and wealth: how financial advice works, or more accurately, how it so often doesn't work, for the vast majority of the population at least. The main point to make here is that proper personal financial advice is necessarily quite expensive, and many might say very expensive. We're going to look at why this is, what this means for so many people, and at what you might do about it. So good personal financial advice costs hundreds of pounds at best. More often than not, it can actually cost thousands of pounds. As a result, it is only available to people who have quite a lot of money already. This is obviously a big problem for everyone else. As the Financial Times has put it, regulation of financial advice in the UK has priced small investors out of the market by making it uneconomical for financial advisors to advise anyone but the extremely wealthy. This fundamental problem has attracted a fair bit of press coverage over the years and is generally described as the advice gap. Most people need financial advice but really can't afford to pay those kinds of fees. That is the gap. A key part of our mission as a company is to seek to help that majority of people who can't afford financial advice. But in order to do that, we have to be very clear about what we can and what we can't do. What we can do is financial education. What we can't do is personal financial advice. And today I wanted to spend a few minutes on this subject, given how important it is for so many people's chances of becoming wealthy. So to explain a bit. Because my first book, How to Own the World, has been one of the top-selling personal finance books in the UK for quite a few years now, people often contact me to ask me for financial advice. It's pretty common for someone to get in touch, say something very kind about How to Own the World, which is very much appreciated, of course, and then give me a fair bit of detail about their personal financial situation and ask me specifically what they should do. To be clear, it's a real honour that people do this, and even feel comfortable sharing very personal details with me about their income and net worth. But it's also a real headache keeping up with it and explaining the legality around what I can and can't do. Questions I get from people include things like, which fund should I buy? Should I increase my mortgage to invest in the stock market? Should I pay down my credit card before I start investing? Or which accounts do I need to open and which stockbroker should I use? Or even, what should I do about my pension? So given how often I have to reply to these sorts of inquiries, I wanted to take some time today in this video to explain a bit more about how financial advice works. And a key point is that there are very strict rules around giving people any kind of investment advice, particularly anything that could be seen as personal investment advice. The right answer for your finances will depend on a complicated cocktail of things which are very personal to you. No one should be able to tell you what you should do without taking account of those things. Anyone seeking to give specific personalized financial advice is required by law, by the financial regulator, to conduct a detailed fact-find process with someone before they are permitted to give such advice. The idea is that any financial advisor must get to know their client to ensure that any advice they then give is appropriate based on that person's very personal circumstances. To do this, a financial advisor will need to have taken very careful account of a great deal of detail about that person. This would include things like their income and expenditure, their mortgage or rent obligations, other debts they might have, current investments, existing pension arrangements, attitude to risk, number of dependents, long-term financial goals, and in fact, a fair bit else besides. This legal obligation to do this is obviously quite rightly aimed at protecting people from the risk of bad or inappropriate advice. The aim is to minimize the chance that people lose money, take on more risk than is appropriate for their personal circumstances, or do something fundamentally silly like make investments while they still have expensive unsecured debt, such as credit card debt or a bank loan, for example. You should be very wary of anyone who tries to give you financial advice of any kind who hasn't taken the time to go through those kinds of details with you. If someone approaches you on social media, for example, to suggest some kind of crypto or trading investment or some unregulated property scheme, if they don't know how much you earn or how much you're worth, how can they possibly know whether what they're suggesting is appropriate for your own personal circumstances? The answer is that they can't and they don't, which is one of the many reasons you should be super careful about such things. A high-risk crypto or property investment could be perfectly sensible for a small proportion of a wealthy person's assets, particularly if they already have their pension and ISA investments beautifully squared away, but a really bad idea for someone making it their only investment who has no pension or other investments yet. Investing based on your own personal circumstances is absolutely crucial if you want to maximize your chance of success. No one who has passed the exams required to become regulated will ever suggest you invest in something without getting a full picture of your personal circumstances, because if they did, they would risk a large fine, possibly even prison time. But this is why personal financial advice is so expensive, because a financial advisor will necessarily have to do a great deal of work before they can legally give you financial advice. There will need to be a face-to-face meeting in someone's home or office, or a long phone call or series of phone calls in order for a financial advisor to get the full understanding of someone's entire financial picture that they are obliged to get by law. An advisor will then spend many more hours gathering paperwork from a client and preparing a formal investment report which provides appropriate, specific, and personally tailored recommendations. And they will be obliged to monitor their clients' investments over time and keep strict records of all that they're doing. The costs of doing all of this are significant, including the costs of regulation and compliance, ongoing compulsory education and training, liability insurance, employing staff, traveling around the country to meet with people and learn about their financial situation, and lots else besides. These costs have also been rising in recent years, like everything else. And bear in mind that the best financial advisors will do a fair bit of this work for people, whether they become customers or not. So they have to price in a meaningful number of people who decide not to become clients in their business model, driving the costs up still further. To make this work economically and actually make a living, the cost of this sort of personally tailored investment advice is therefore very expensive, and it is hard to see how this might change. Clearly, this reality is extremely problematic for millions of people because they just can't afford those sorts of fees. And here comes ultimately the most important point of this video, that the answer to this problem, such as there is one for those millions of people, is to learn enough about finance to do a good job with your money without the need for financial advice. Until such time as you can afford financial advice, the best option is to become a DIY investor. And the key point to make here, which I've been making for more than a decade, is that this is a great deal less frightening and difficult than so many people fear. An analogy I use fairly often is that learning how to drive your finances is actually no harder than learning how to drive a car. Before you can pass your driving test, you have to spend a certain number of hours practicing and studying the highway code, for example. To me, it's crazy that most people think it's entirely normal to spend the time needed to learn how to drive a car, but so few take the time to learn how to drive their finances, particularly when you consider that learning how to drive your finances can and will have such a huge positive impact on your life. To be clear, there is some work involved. You are not going to learn enough to do things properly from a few 1-minute TikTok videos. But getting the nuts and bolts roughly right isn't as hard as so many people think. In our next few videos, we'll go step by step, looking at many of the things you'll want to learn to give you confidence to become a DIY investor and drive your own finances. Until next time, I wish you the very best.